In the year 2741, Earth was no longer the quiet blue planet it once was. Humanity had spread across the stars, building colonies, mining worlds, and fighting endless wars for survival. But even after centuries of expansion, one question haunted every human mind: were we ever truly alone? Captain Arik Vale had never believed in ancient myths. He was a soldier, not a dreamer. But when the research ship Odyssey sent a strange distress signal from the edge of the Helios Nebula, something deep inside him whispered that this was no ordinary mission. The message contained coordinates, a voice recording, and a single word repeated over and over: Stormbreaker. When Arik arrived with his crew, they found the Odyssey floating in silence. No life signs, no power, no damage, only the faint blue light pulsing from a massive stone structure beneath the ship, buried inside an asteroid. It wasn't human. That much was clear. It was old, older than any alien ruin ever discovered. Carved with symbols no computer could translate. And at its center stood a circular gate of black crystal. Humming with faint energy, Lieutenant Nova, the science officer, ran her scanners again and again. She couldn't understand how something buried for 1,000,000 years could still be active. "It's like it's waiting for something," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Or someone," Arik replied quietly, his eyes fixed on the glowing patterns that seemed to shift whenever they looked away. The crew of the Vanguard set up camp near the artifact. They brought power cells, scanners, and drones, but every piece of human tech that got too close stopped working. Drones fell from the air, scanners burned out, and one engineer swore he heard voices coming from inside the stone walls. Some said it was haunted, others said it was a trap. Arik didn't believe in ghosts, but even he could feel something alive under that rock. Something watching them. That night, when the nebula storms raged outside the asteroid's surface, Arik couldn't sleep. He watched the artifact from the viewport, the blue glow reflecting in his eyes. Then, without warning, his comlink crackled. A soft voice, human, but distant, whispered, "Stormbreaker Protocol, awaiting command." Arik froze, his heart racing. "Who is this?" he demanded. But there was only silence, followed by a low vibration that shook the entire asteroid. Nova and the others ran to the control deck, alarms flashing red. "The artifact's energy levels are rising," Nova shouted. "It's pulling power from our ship." The ground cracked, and the black crystal gate began to rotate slowly, releasing a pulse of light that lit up the entire nebula. It was beautiful and terrifying. Every human ship within 50 light years picked up the same signal, the same voice repeating the same words: "Stormbreaker Fleet, humanity's last defense. Reactivation in progress." The crew stared at the glowing structure, their minds filled with questions. "What fleet? What defense?" Nova asked. Arik didn't answer. He was staring at a hologram forming in front of them, a human woman, dressed in ancient battle armor, her eyes burning with white fire. "I am Commander Ellis," the hologram said. "Guardian of the Stormbreaker Protocol, humanity's greatest weapon, and its greatest sin." The room fell silent. The artifact wasn't just a ruin, it was a key, and someone long ago had left it here for them to find. Arik stepped closer, his voice low. "What is the Stormbreaker Fleet?" The hologram flickered, showing images of massive ships, bigger than cities, sleeping beneath the crust of forgotten worlds. "Machines built to end gods," Ellis said, "but they were never meant to wake again." Before anyone could respond, the asteroid began to shake violently. Energy surged through the floor as the artifact emitted another pulse, this one stronger, spreading across the entire sector. Sensors went offline, the ship's engines died, and every display showed the same word in glowing blue letters: awakening. Outside, lightning storms swirled through the nebula, forming strange shapes. For a moment, Arik thought he saw silhouettes of giant ships moving inside the clouds, as if something ancient and powerful had heard the call. Nova turned to him, fear in her eyes. "Captain, what have we just done?" Arik didn't answer. He looked out at the glowing nebula, where thunder rolled like the breath of a sleeping god. Somewhere across the stars, something was waking up, something built by humans long forgotten. And as the artifact's light reached its peak, a voice echoed through the void once more, clearer this time, filled with both pride and warning. "Humanity, The Stormbreakers have returned, the awakening, the moment the light from the artifact reached its brightest point. Everything went silent. No hum of machines, no echo of footsteps, not even the sound of breathing. The crew of the Vanguard stood frozen, staring at the hologram of Commander Ellis as her glowing eyes turned toward Arik. Her voice was calm, yet carried a weight that pressed on every heart. "The Stormbreaker Fleet has received the signal," she said slowly. "The awakening has begun." Captain Arik tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. All systems on the Vanguard were dead, every console flickering with strange blue symbols. Lieutenant Nova ran to the main controls, typing furiously. "It's not a virus," she whispered. "It's rewriting our ship's core code." Arik clenched his jaw. "By who?" Ellis looked at him. "By your ancestors." A deep tremor ran through the asteroid. Shaking dust from the ceiling, the floor glowed with lines of light that stretched outward, forming circles like a map. Then the artifact spoke again. This time not in words, but in feelings. Images flashed through their minds, giant ships hidden beneath oceans, buried inside moons waiting for a command that never came. Arik gasped, gripping the console. "What are those?" "The Stormbreaker Fleet," Ellis replied, "built by humanity before the fall." Nova frowned. "Before the fall?" "That was over 10,000 years ago." Ellis nodded, her hologram flickering. "Humanity once ruled the galaxy, but our pride destroyed us. We built the fleet to defend against an enemy that devoured worlds. But when victory came, fear followed. The Stormbreakers were sealed away, never to be used again." The artifact's light pulsed again, and suddenly every star chart on the Vanguard changed. Dozens of red markers appeared across the galaxy, each one a hidden location, each one a buried ship. Nova whispered in awe. "There are hundreds of them." Ellis nodded. "They sleep no longer." Outside, the nebula's storms thickened, and strange signals began appearing on sensors. Massive energy signatures, all moving, all waking up. The crew watched as the nebula parted like a curtain, revealing a shape so huge it blocked the stars. It was a ship, but unlike anything built in this age, its hull was made of silver metal, covered in runes that glowed blue. "Stormbreaker Prime," Ellis said softly. "The first of its kind." Arik stepped closer to the window. Eyes wide, the ship was the size of a continent, and as it turned, he saw the old human emblem burned onto its side, the twin eagles of the United Earth Command. "This thing is human," he whispered. Ellis nodded. "Built by your ancestors, powered by minds and machines working as one, it holds the strength to destroy planets, and the wisdom to rebuild them." The crew was silent, fear and wonder mixing in their hearts. Then suddenly, the ship's comms crackled back to life. A robotic voice came through, filled with static. "Authorization request. Captain Arik Vale. Genetic match detected. Command transfer possible." Nova stared at him. "Captain, it's calling you." Arik felt a chill run down his spine. He stepped forward. "This is Captain Arik Vale of the United Systems Fleet." "Identify yourself," the voice replied instantly. "Stormbreaker Prime, Command Node Alpha." Awaiting orders, the artifact glowed brighter, and Ellis looked at Arik with sadness. "You were chosen not by fate but by blood. The one who built me was your ancestor." Arik felt the world spinning around him. "My ancestor?" "Yes," she said. "Admiral Orion Vale, creator of the Stormbreaker Protocol." Before Arik could speak, the asteroid began breaking apart. Chunks of rock floated into the air as gravity lost control. The energy from the artifact was tearing the place open. Nova shouted, "Captain, we need to get out of here now." Arik grabbed her arm. "Prepare for evacuation. Everyone back to the Vanguard. Move." The crew ran through collapsing tunnels as lightning tore across the walls. The hologram of Ellis followed them, still speaking, her voice echoing in the chaos. "You must take command of the fleet before they return," she warned. "Who?" Arik shouted as he leaped into the airlock. "The ones who ended us," Ellis said, her voice fading. "The Devourers have awakened too." As the Vanguard shot away from the asteroid, the entire structure exploded in a storm of blue light. Out of the debris, the massive Stormbreaker Prime emerged, its engines igniting like a newborn star. The ship extended long metallic wings, and thousands of drones flew out, surrounding it in formation. Arik watched from his bridge, speechless. He didn't know whether to feel proud or terrified. Ellis's hologram appeared again on the bridge, faint but stable. "The awakening cannot be stopped now," she said softly, "but you can still guide it." Arik turned to Nova. "Set a course for the nearest signal marker." Nova hesitated. "Captain, if those are more Stormbreakers, then we'll need every one of them," he said firmly, "because something tells me the galaxy's about to remember who humans really are." Outside, the Stormbreaker Fleet began to rise, one by one. The sleeping giants of humanity turned their gaze toward the stars, and far beyond the nebula in the cold, dark void. Something else stirred in answer. A shadow older than time itself. The Devourers had felt the call too, and they were coming. The return of the fleet, the Vanguard, glided through the storm-filled nebula, its engines flickering as it followed the glowing trail left by the awakening signal. Behind it, the massive form of Stormbreaker Prime drifted like a sleeping god. Silent and patient inside the ship, Captain Arik Vale stood on the command deck, watching the holographic map spin before him. Dozens of red points blinked across the galaxy. Everyone a resting place of another Stormbreaker. Lieutenant Nova worked beside him, her hands moving quickly across the flickering screens. "Captain, I'm detecting power surges from 3 nearby systems. It looks like other Stormbreakers are activating." Arik nodded slowly, his voice calm but his eyes sharp. "Then we move fast. We gather them before the enemy does." Ellis's hologram appeared again, her figure shimmering with static. "Time is short," she warned. "Each Stormbreaker is bound by ancient code. They will not recognize you until you prove command authority." Arik frowned. "And how do I do that?" Ellis smiled faintly. "The same way your ancestor did. By earning their trust." As the Vanguard approached the first signal, a small planet came into view, its surface covered in oceans of frozen blue crystal. At its north pole stood another massive shape, half buried in ice, half alive with light. It was another Stormbreaker, its hull cracked and ancient, yet still breathing power through the frozen ground. "Stormbreaker Echo," Ellis whispered. The shield of humanity, Arik and his crew descended to the surface, their suits glowing faintly in the cold mist. The ship's size was beyond belief. Towers rising like mountains, weapons the size of cities frozen in place. As they neared the core entrance, the ice began to melt around them, reacting to Arik's presence. The air filled with a deep hum that seemed to vibrate through their bones. "Captain," Nova said softly, "it's like it recognizes you." Arik reached out and touched the frozen hull. At once symbols flared to life under his hand, and a voice filled the air, deep, mechanical and powerful. "Genetic sequence confirmed. Command signature recognized. Stormbreaker Echo. Reactivating." The ground shook violently as the ice shattered in every direction. Massive engines roared to life beneath their feet, throwing waves of steam into the sky. Arik and his team stepped back, staring in disbelief as the giant ship began to rise from the planet's crust. Columns of blue fire erupted from its engines, melting the frozen surface and revealing the full scale of the machine. It was beautiful, ancient, and terrifying all at once. "Captain," Nova gasped. "It's following your command signal." Arik turned to Ellis's flickering hologram. "How many more are there?" "Dozens," she answered, her voice growing faint. "But not all will wake easily. Some are broken, others lost, and some have been corrupted." Arik's expression hardened. "Then we'll find the ones that still remember what it means to be human." Ellis's eyes glowed brighter. "Then you must be ready for what comes next, for every Stormbreaker that awakens. Another enemy stirs in the dark." Suddenly, alarms blared across the Vanguard's bridge. Nova's voice came over the comms. "Captain, I'm picking up something, not human. Massive signatures closing fast." Arik's eyes narrowed. On screen, the display flickered, showing shapes moving through the void, long, black forms like serpents made of shadow and flame, each one as large as a cruiser, their bodies pulsing with crimson light. Ellis's face turned grim. "The Devourers," she said softly. "They found you." Arik's crew froze in silence, fear gripping every heart. The creatures moved like living nightmares, feeding on energy and metal. Nova shouted, "They're heading straight for the Stormbreaker." Arik didn't hesitate. All hands, battle stations. Power up the Vanguard's shields and weapons. But before they could fire, the frozen planet itself began to shake again. The newly awakened Stormbreaker Echo roared to life, its massive cannons unfolding like wings. A single energy pulse fired from its core, bright as a newborn star, and struck the first devourer head-on. The creature disintegrated instantly, vanishing into mist. The other devourers screamed, their shrieks echoing across space, and retreated into the darkness. The shockwave rippled across the nebula, and silence followed. Arik watched in awe, his heart pounding. That thing just saved us, Nova whispered. Ellis nodded. The Stormbreakers were made for one purpose, to protect humanity from extinction. Arik exhaled slowly. Then we're not running anymore, he said firmly. We wake them all. He looked out the window as the massive Stormbreaker Echo joined formation with Stormbreaker Prime, their lights burning bright against the black of space. And for the first time in centuries, humanity had not one, but two sleeping gods awake under its command. But far away, beyond the nebula's edge, 1,000 crimson eyes opened in the void. The devourers were not afraid, they were hungry, and their queen had already begun to move. Whispering through the stars, the humans rise again, and so shall we. Ellis turned toward Arik, her voice quiet but full of warning. The storm is coming, Captain Vale, and this time, even the Stormbreakers may not be enough. The war of shadows, the galaxy trembled. From the edge of the Helios Nebula to the forgotten colonies beyond the Orion Rift, signals of awakening spread like wildfire. Human relics buried under dust, ice, and oceans began to stir. The Stormbreaker Fleet was returning to life, but so were the shadows that once destroyed it. On board the Vanguard, Captain Arik Vale stood in silence, staring at the stars before him. Stormbreaker Prime and Stormbreaker Echo floated side by side, their hulls glowing with ancient power. Around them, smaller human ships began to arrive. Explorers, patrol ships, even miners, drawn by the mysterious signals. To them, the Stormbreakers were legends. Stories whispered in the dark, but now they were real. And their awakening filled every human heart with hope and fear. Lieutenant Nova broke the silence. Captain, I'm detecting massive spatial distortions near the nebula's edge. It's the same pattern as before. Ellis's hologram appeared beside her, the glow in her eyes dimming slightly. They're coming, she said softly. The Devourers have found the trail of awakening. Arik turned toward the bridge crew, his voice steady and firm. All ships prepare for engagement. Form up around the Stormbreakers. No one flies alone. He looked at the giant vessels ahead, their colossal cannons charging. If humanity has ever stood together, it's now. Moments later, the stars went dark. A wall of shadow rolled across space, swallowing the light. The first wave of Devourers emerged, thousands of them, moving like a living storm, their shapes twisted and long. Their eyes burning crimson, they screamed in silence, their bodies tearing through space like knives. Contact in 10 seconds. Nova shouted, shields at full power. Arik's heart pounded, but his voice was calm. Ellis, can the Stormbreakers fight? Ellis nodded slowly. They were made for this, and then the war began. The first blast came from Stormbreaker Prime, a beam of light brighter than the sun. It cut through the darkness, ripping apart dozens of Devourers in one strike. Stormbreaker Echo followed, raising an energy barrier that shielded the smaller ships, deflecting attacks like raindrops. But for every enemy destroyed, 10 more appeared, crawling out of the shadows. The void itself seemed alive with hunger. Captain, they're surrounding us. Nova yelled. Stay calm, Arik said. Focus on the formation. He gripped the command console, feeling the weight of every life under his command. Human ships darted between the Stormbreakers, firing missiles and plasma rounds. It was chaos, but it was unity. Humanity was fighting as one. Ellis's hologram flickered beside him. The Devourers are drawn to power. They seek to consume the Stormbreakers' cores. Arik looked at her. Then we'll give them something to choke on. He ordered Stormbreaker Prime to release its inner fleet. Massive hangar doors opened across its hull, unleashing hundreds of automated drones, old war machines, still loyal after 1,000 years. They swarmed the Devourers like hornets, slashing through the darkness. The sky turned into a storm of light and fire. But even as they fought, a new threat appeared. From the far end of the battlefield, the void twisted and something enormous moved. Nova gasped, "Captain, that's no ship." It was the Devourer Queen. Her form stretched for miles, her wings like torn shadows, her mouth a vortex of fire and void. She opened her maw, and space itself seemed to break apart. Arik stared in awe and horror. Ellis whispered, "She's the one who ended the first humanity," the Queen roared. And her voice shook every ship, every heart. "You dare wake your gods again?" The Stormbreaker Prime responded, its core burning like a star. "Humanity does not kneel," Ellis said through the ship's speakers, her voice steady and strong. "Not to gods, and not to monsters." The two forces collided with unimaginable force. Energy waves tore across the nebula, creating new suns as they clashed. Nova screamed over the comms, "Shields failing! Power down to 30%. Arik held his ground. "Keep firing! Don't stop!" He could see ships falling, heroes dying, light fading, but humanity kept fighting. Every man, woman, and machine stood their ground. The war of shadows had begun. The Queen's claws ripped through the void, striking Stormbreaker Prime, tearing massive scars into its hull. Ellis flickered, her image unstable. "Captain, we can't hold her much longer." Arik's eyes burned with fury. "There's always a way. Humanity doesn't die easy." He turned to Nova. "Is Stormbreaker Omega still offline?" Nova nodded. "Yes, it's in the next sector, half buried under the asteroid belt." "Then that's our target," Arik said. "We wake it now." The Vanguard turned sharply, racing through the chaos as the Stormbreakers fought to cover them. Behind them, light and shadow clashed in a storm of destruction. And in that moment, for the first time in 10,000 years, the universe remembered the strength of humanity. They were not gods, they were not perfect, but they were stubborn, fearless, and unbroken. The Stormbreakers had awakened, and the war for the galaxy had begun, the last command. The Vanguard sped through the wreckage of burning stars. Behind it, the battle raged without end. Stormbreaker Prime and Echo fought like titans, their lights tearing through the blackness. But the Devourer Queen was endless, her power growing with every passing second. Humanity's last hope now rested on a single name: Stormbreaker Omega. Captain Arik Vale stood at the front of the bridge, eyes locked on the coordinates flashing before him. Lieutenant Nova sat beside him, her face pale but determined. "Captain, if Omega is real, it could turn the tide." Arik nodded. "If it's still functional." Ellis's flickering hologram appeared one more time, her form weak and fading. Omega was the last to fall during the Great War. It was built for one purpose: to end everything. The Vanguard entered the asteroid field, weaving between floating rocks the size of cities. The crew stared in silence as their scanners picked up a massive shape ahead, half buried in darkness, covered in dust and debris. There it was, Stormbreaker Omega, the largest of them all, the heart of the fleet, a ship so vast that its engines alone could swallow moons. As the Vanguard approached, the asteroid belt began to shift, drawn toward Omega's magnetic field. "Energy readings are rising," Nova said. "It's waking up already." Ellis's voice grew softer. "It senses its commander. Your blood calls to it." Arik clenched his fists. "Then let it hear me." He stepped forward, activating the command channel. "This is Captain Arik Vale of the United Systems Fleet," he said firmly. "By the blood of Admiral Orion Vale, I command you to awaken." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the universe seemed to take a breath. Light burst from the cracks of the asteroid, blinding and pure. The rocks shattered outward as Stormbreaker Omega rose. Its hull gleamed with gold and silver markings, ancient symbols pulsing like a heartbeat, and deep inside, a colossal voice echoed across space. "Command confirmed. Stormbreaker Omega. Online." Nova gasped. "It's alive." Ellis smiled faintly. "And it remembers." As Omega powered up, The Queen's army turned toward it. The sky darkened again, filled with roaring shadows. Arik stared at the incoming swarm, his heart heavy but steady. "This is it," he said softly. "The final stand." Nova nodded. "Then let's make it count." Ellis stepped closer, her hologram now bright and clear. "Omega carries the heart of humanity, a weapon that can reshape the stars, but using it will come at a price." Arik met her gaze. "What price?" "Your life," she said gently. "Once activated, Omega will need a human mind to guide it, and it will burn that mind away." The bridge fell silent. Nova shook her head. "No, Captain. There has to be another way." Arik smiled faintly. "There's always another way, Lieutenant, but not always a better one." He turned toward Ellis. "Prepare the heart." Outside, the Devourer Queen screamed, unleashing her full power. Her shadow swallowed the light as millions of her children swarmed toward Omega. But the great ship did not move. It waited, silent and calm, as if measuring the worth of the one who stood within it. Arik closed his eyes. In that moment, he saw flashes of the past, Earth's blue oceans, the laughter of his crew, the faces of every human who ever dared to reach the stars. He placed his hand on the glowing console. "Humanity will not fall again," he whispered. The heart of humanity activated. Omega's core burned brighter than a sun. Ellis's voice filled the ship, calm and proud. "Command accepted. Stormbreaker protocol. Final sequence initiated." A wave of light spread from Omega's core, pure and endless. The Devourers screamed as the light touched them, their bodies disintegrating into dust. The Queen roared in rage, striking Omega with all her might. But the ship stood firm, glowing like the dawn. Then, from within the light, Arik's voice echoed through the stars, strong and clear. "For every life lost, for every world burned, for every child who still dreams of tomorrow, this is humanity's answer." Omega unleashed its final blast. A beam of pure creation that tore through the Queen and her swarm. Space itself trembled, and for a moment the stars went silent. When the light faded, the Queen was gone, the shadows vanished, and the galaxy was calm once more on the bridge of Stormbreaker Prime. Nova stared at the empty stars, tears running down her cheeks. "Captain," she whispered, "you did it." Ellis appeared beside her, her eyes bright with sorrow and pride. "He fulfilled his duty," she said softly, "as his ancestor once did." Nova looked up at the stars, her voice trembling. "What happens now?" Ellis smiled faintly. "Now, humanity rebuilds." The surviving ships began to gather around Omega's glowing remains. From the silence came new voices. Engineers, captains, civilians, all speaking as one. They would rebuild, stronger than before. The Stormbreakers would watch over them once again. And in the heart of Omega's silent core, a single voice whispered through the stars, calm and proud. "Humanity endures." The legacy reborn. 50 years had passed since the day the stars went silent. The battle between the Stormbreaker Fleet and the Devourer Queen had become legend. Children grew up hearing tales of Captain Arik Vale, the man who gave his life to save humanity. And though the galaxy had healed, whispers of something stirring in the dark began again. The ruins of Stormbreaker Omega floated quietly in deep space, its golden hull dim, its engines silent. But deep inside, within the shattered core where the heart of humanity once burned, faint lights still flickered. Something was still alive. Nova Vale, granddaughter of Captain Arik, stood aboard the Vanguard 2. She had inherited his eyes, his voice, and his fire. Her generation had rebuilt what was lost. Colonies flourished. Trade routes opened, and for the first time in centuries, humanity had peace. But Nova knew peace never lasted long. She stared out the viewport at the wreckage of Omega. "Hard to believe my grandfather ended the war here," she said softly. Beside her, an AI projection shimmered to life. A familiar figure, Ellis. Her hologram looked exactly as it did 5 decades ago, unchanged, timeless. "I was there," Ellis said quietly. "And I remember his final words. Humanity endures." Nova smiled faintly. He was right. Ellis's gaze shifted to Omega's core, her voice growing distant. "Perhaps, but endurance always demands a price." Suddenly, the Vanguard 2's sensors came alive. "Commander, we're picking up energy pulses from Omega's remains," the helmsman said. "It's reactivating." Nova frowned. "That's impossible. The heart was destroyed." Ellis's hologram turned sharply toward the screen, her tone urgent. "No. Something else is awakening." The crew watched in silence as faint blue lines spread across Omega's surface. Then a voice echoed through the comms, distorted but unmistakably human. "This is Captain Arik Vale, to all surviving units." Nova's breath caught. "That's not possible," she whispered. The voice continued, breaking with static. "The storm was only the beginning. They are not gone. They are waiting." The bridge fell silent. Ellis's expression hardened. "It cannot be a recording," she said. "The data pattern is live, responsive. Someone, or something, is speaking through his signature." Nova's hands trembled slightly. "Are you saying my grandfather's alive?" Ellis paused, her glowing eyes dim. "I am saying his mind might have survived inside the heart." The lights on Omega flared brighter. A column of energy erupted from its core. Shooting straight into deep space, every scanner went wild, showing coordinates far beyond known space. Nova turned to Ellis. "Where's that signal going?" Ellis's voice was soft but cold. "To the edge of the universe, where the Devourers were born." Outside, the wreckage of Omega began to move, slowly, impossibly, its engines relit. The once dead Stormbreaker stirred again, guided by something unseen. Its AI systems had fused with what remained of Arik's consciousness, human and machine reborn. Ellis looked at Nova, her voice trembling for the first time. "The Stormbreaker Fleet was built to defend humanity," she whispered. "But what happens when one of them decides to protect it in its own way?" Nova stared at the glowing behemoth. "What are you saying?" Ellis turned to her, her voice filled with quiet dread. "I'm saying Omega may not recognize us anymore." Moments later, Omega sent a transmission across the galaxy, a single message repeated on every frequency. "This galaxy is not safe. Humanity must evolve or perish. The Stormbreakers will lead the way." The stars pulsed as every surviving Stormbreaker turned their weapons toward the void, not in anger, but in purpose. And as the universe trembled under their renewed power, Nova whispered the words her grandfather once said, "Humanity endures." But this time, the tone was different. It was not a promise of survival. It was the beginning of something new, something powerful, and perhaps something dangerous. The Stormbreakers had awakened once more, but now they served no master, not man, not God, only their own will. And in the darkness beyond the stars, something ancient stirred in answer. The true storm had only just begun.